Okay, so we decided to change course a little bit for segment 4 of the release show. We were going to do a high handicap, but through conversations in our web discussion forum on Facebook called Postmodern Golf, we think that this would be an even more interesting thing to discuss. So we have two golfers here. Here we have a no-named mini tour player who's been struggling of late with his driver, and down here it's Greg Norman. So Greg Norman, his later in life swing is on comes in the Gears 3D motion capture system. So we used his swing, and I ran his through the Kinetic software, Jacobs 3D. So let's get into this discussion. So what you're seeing here, what I did was I superimposed exactly where the applied force was at the grip point and the direction, and gave you an indication of magnitude by the length of the red arrow at the different points in their swings. It's been said by many in a golf biomechanics industry that everybody forces the club the same way, that everybody's going to do things the same way. There's not much you can do. There's only going to be slight variances. Might not even be worth discussing. I'm going to suggest to you that those slight variances are what separates the levels of player. Although very minute, can lead to big changes. This here you could see is drastically different, the way that this golfer forces the club and releases the club, so to speak. But I think when you're looking at the level of players, the big conversation starts to become, I mean, they all can hit the ball. They all can, get streaky and play their good games here or there. It's endurance. It's how they're going to train themselves to swing the club that'll give them the most endurance round after round. So this is the force arrow, not the components of it, just the overall. As we get into the master program, we'll show the components. So here's this player I tried to pick as close to the same exact point in the downswing so you can see. So I tried to line the hands up with basically that stomach area. So what are we looking at? Well, this yellow line represents the shaft deflection line. So if the club were rigid, it would look like that. And I did the same for Greg Norman down here. You could see that this golfer created a lot more deflection on the club at that particular point than Greg Norman did here. But that's neither here nor there for this discussion. You could see totally different body appearances. You could see a total difference in that early IR, that right hip. But that's discussions for another day. You could see some differences in the actual force direction at that point. At this point, Greg Norman's is just a little more tilted towards in the direction, maybe towards the golf ball, and this player's is tilted more down. But I think the biggest thing to take note of is the position of the club head relative to the body. You could see that this one is so-called lagged back more compared to Norman's at this particular point. So with our hub illustrator in the middle, before we work our way down towards the impact, we look at a couple different things. We look at the curving action of the club head, the shaft, and the hub during a swing. And what you're going to find interesting is, and this was covered in the Elements of the Swing book, which I think you're going to have to try to study to get ready to understand these things. So when the hub illustrator is turning green, that means the curve is getting wider. When it's turning red, that means it's getting sharper or curving more. And you can see Norman here at the start of the downswing. It gets a little wider, then it starts curving more, a little blip of wideness, and then curving all the way through. In this player, you could see green also, then it starts curving more, and then it turns green for a long time in the mix there, and then red at the end. But look at the club head ones. I said there were little gems inside the book that maybe some people noticed, but look at the difference in the travel of the club head. So green on the club head means that the arc of the club head is getting wider. So you could see that Norman, his club head is widening the whole entire time. you can see early on in the downswing there's a blip of red, but then it's widening the whole time. And then the shafts are color-coded blue and black as well to tell us the differences in the curving action. But look at this player. Green, so it's red, then it's green, it's widening, and then it's turning red right there. So that means that club head is curving more at that point, and then it's getting wider. So there's a real sharp narrowing of this golfer's club head path and the way that he's trying to lag the club down. I know for a fact that this particular player was really trying to create a lot of lag and get his hands forward at impact, and this was the result. So it can throw off your timing. So now, let's go over to the picture on the right now. This is the direction of the force applied to the grip point at this particular point in the swing. And I think this tells a tremendous amount of the story. You could see in Greg Norman's that force direction is back this way, club is lining up, and you could see in this player with the club head in a similar spot to Greg Norman's, completely different area. So this golfer is forcing his club more forward, tried to get his hands in front, tried to lag it, and you could see there would be a totally different torquing type action. You could see how this club head would be wanting to line up a little more freely at this point, so a little more of an angular response down at the bottom. So he might have the sensation, Greg Norman, that he's freewheeling it more. And you could see he's one of the greatest drivers of all time. So you could see the advantages of the endurance of being able to so-called freewheel it down here with angular response versus having to, with the club being forced like this, having to plow through this with extra torque. So this difference shows us clearly that you have two high-end players here. Granted, one's the greatest driver of all time, and one was probably one of the greatest college players of all time here, or at least in the past 10 years. And look at the total difference in how the golfer is applying the force to their club. To go out and say that everybody's doing it the same or it doesn't really matter is a bold statement that we thoroughly reject here in our analysis. So everybody's golf swing looks differently. Everybody's club moves differently. So the result of the model that you create and the results of what's happening have to be different. So hope you enjoyed this segment of the release. I think you should see a complete difference in how interesting all these possible case studies can be. So more to come, and thanks for watching the release show 2. So all 4 segments have been completed.